Author Dean Koontz once said, "Some people think only intellect counts, knowing how to solve problems, knowing how to get by, knowing how to identify an advantage and seize it. But the functions of intellect are insufficient without courage, love, friendship, compassion, and empathy." This is the Producer's Lounge Podcast, the best podcast online for tips and tricks on producing great film, television, and web content. Welcome back for Season 3, Episode 2, hosted and produced by GreaterandGrander.com. On this week's episode, we're chatting with Grant E. Rosenberg, who has produced TV series including Lois and Clark, Poltergeist, The Outer Limits, and a personal favorite of mine, Time Tracks. We discuss being an executive at Paramount and Disney under Michael Eisner, as well as his wild television and development adventures at studios across Hollywood. What I found especially helpful in this episode is our discussion of a 100-point scale to help determine the likelihood of your TV pitch getting accepted. We also talk about how his past career as a development executive and TV showrunner influenced his Gideon trilogy of novels, now available for purchase on Amazon. I should also mention we had some technical issues with this recording. I tried to cut around them, but if you hear some words abruptly cut off, that's why. It's still worth a listen. Here now is my conversation with Grant E. Rosenberg.
Should I have my wife make sounds like we're in a cafeteria or something like that in a cool restaurant?
No, I think we're good on that. I think we're good on your novel, of course, your second novel being GIDEON Resurrection. Can I ask it? So I saw on your website GIDEON Resurrection is the second part of a trilogy. Can you kind of give a overall idea of what that is trilogy is about?
Sure. It's a suspense thriller, I guess, set in San Francisco, which is where I was born and raised. Mm-hmm. And it's about a young woman, female doctor, who runs a clinic with her father, who's also a doctor. Mm-hmm. And everything in her life is going great until her father is murdered. And once her father's murdered, she comes to find out that he had an extremely dark past. He was working basically as a hitman. And I'll talk about that in a second. And her life is in peril as a result of that. So the question is, does she sort of take the mantle just to protect herself? So it's sort of Breaking Bad. It's a little bit Liz Salander, if you will. And I wrote it originally maybe 10 years ago as a pilot, a spec pilot, and got great reactions to it, but no make it. Everybody thought, well, it's too dark, and so I went back in the trunk, and then at some point after I had some time, I thought, you know what, I really love this idea. I'm just going to write it as a book. And there you go. So I wrote it as it's a standalone, but I left a lot of threads open at the end. And when I finished the second, I left threads open at the end as well. And my plan is to conclude it with the third book. I spent a lot of time before I wrote the pilot and then before I wrote the novel grounding it in reality. People say like, oh, really? He's a doctor, and then she's a doctor, and she's a murderer. An inordinate amount of time in that work in terms of believability that a person could be pushed this way. So it's a little Hitchcockian in terms of dropping a normal person into an extremely abnormal situation. Ironically, now we're in the process of negotiating a company who wants to option as a television series, so it could come all the way full back around and become a series again.
Mazel tov. That's fantastic to hear.
Yeah, it's cool.
Awesome. And you mentioned it came from your experience growing up in San Francisco?
Just the setting.
Just the setting. Okay, cool.
The rest of it. I'm neither female nor a doctor nor a hitman, but the setting, yes, I grew up in San Francisco.
Awesome. What was it like growing up in San Francisco back in the day?
It was great. It was great. I'm very, very proud of the city. I was born in the city, and then when I was young, my parents started moving south peninsula. So I really sort of grew up more of a suburban situation that right in the heart of the city, but used to be go to the city all the time. So, yeah, it was, was the hippie movement. when we would go. So yeah, that was that when I would go back into the city, that was in late 60s, early 70s.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very cool. So when growing up did you decide that you wanted to get into the entertainment industry?
Um, I when I was growing up, I ended up going to school at UC Davis,
Mhm,
Silver Sacramento,
mhm,
and with the intent of going on to law school.
uh-huh.
And halfway through my year, I realized I didn't want to be a lawyer, and I went to visit my counselor, and he said, "What do you like doing?" And I said, "Well, I like public speaking. I like debating. I like these kinds of classes." And he said, "Well, why don't you do something in radio or television?" I thought, "Well, can I make a living doing that?" So I shifted gears. I had a degree in political science,
Mhm,
and then I got a second degree in communications,
mm.
um, and with the intent of going into broadcast news.
Oh, okay.
And the first opportunity that I had was at a page at NBC, and I was told if I got hired on the page staff, then I could maybe move into the news department as a editorial assistant. So 6 months of after applying to the page staff, and I
Mhm,
don't have any relatives in the business at that point. So, I mean, now I have some of my daughters are in the business, but I didn't know anybody. Very difficult to get hired on as a page at NBC in Burbank
mhm.
for $2.25 an hour, guaranteed 20 hours a week. So even at that level, they had, I think like 500 people applying per. Anyway, long story short, I got a job as page. And by the time I was there, they weren't hiring editorial assistants anymore. So here I am now as a page. I have no idea. I'm getting paid nothing. I'm giving tours at NBC and I'm seating people at the Tonight Show. And what am I going to do with my life? So I ended up in the research department at NBC, and then eventually getting hired at Paramount to in the research department there. And I moved up the ladder very quickly. Um,
Just to get a sense
and I
of
was
the
doing that.
timeline,
Sorry,
so you graduated. No, you're good, you're good. So you graduated UC Davis, and then how long were you kind of in the PAGE program again? Like, what around what years was this, or
about so this is in 1975.
got it, got it.
And I was in the page program for about 9 months.
Mhm,
And back then, I don't know what it's like now, but back then, um, you could only be a page for a year. And if you didn't, the intent of being a page was to get off the page staff and get a job at the studio, at the network somewhere.
mhm.
So I ended up taking the first job that was offered, which was in the research department.
Okay.
Had no interest, no desire to work in research and crunch numbers, but that was the only way to get off the page staff at the time. So I worked at NBC for 2 years in the research department, and then was hired at Paramount.
Mhm.
And I did research there, and I also did film market research. And that was testing movies, which I'm sure you've probably been to. You know, take a movie out, and then you hand audience hand the audience cards. You know, how did you like it? You know, blah 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 blah. So the year that I was doing that, um, I was gone, I think 8 weekends in the year, because 'cause we'd fly out on Thursday,
Oh, you were
go
traveling to
to
different parts of the country doing the research. Ah,
yeah. So, like, we'd fly to Kansas City on Thursday, test whatever movie, then
mhm.
fly to Boston and test the movie there on Saturday, and then fly back for I'd get home sometime, late Saturday or usually Sunday and have about 5 hours at home, go back to work. So that was my life for a while. And, cards, audience cards.
Mhm.
Um, but that wasn't where I wanted to end up. The one great well, there were two upsides to it. First of all, I was working very closely with both the heads of television and the heads of features. So I was working closely with Michael Eisner and Jeff Katzenberg and Don Simpson at the time.
Mm.
And so I got to know them all very well. And I had a very, very good relationship with Eisner. And one day I walked into his office and I'm like 26, I guess, or something like that, 27. I said, I can't do this anymore. If I look at another row of numbers, I'm just gonna, I'm gonna go crazy. He said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to get into development. I want to do something creative. He said, do you want to get into features or TV? I said, well, it seems to me that everybody gets into television to get into movies. So I guess I'd rather just start in the movies. He said, okay, I think we'll put you in television. I said, why did you ask? He said, I just wanted to know what your rationalization was. He said, but you've got such a better handle on TV because you've been doing research in that area. So I got a job at Paramount. I was working as a development executive at Paramount. So
Now,
that was transition.
and at this time, because I've read Eisner's biography, of course, he was the number 2 man at Paramount. He was responsible for all of the development, if memory serves. And that's also quite an infamous group of executives to know. Don Simpson, for those who don't know, is the infamous producer who started out as a Paramount development executive, eventually partnered with Jerry Bruckheimer to create a lot of classic 80s films, and then ended his life tragically due to heart attack and drugs and all of that stuff. I gotta ask, what are some of your most memorable favorite stories from those 3 guys where you maybe learned the most?
Um, well, Michael, I ended up working for Michael years at Paramount, and then I went with him to Disney
Mhm.
and for 3 more years. So I ended up working with Michael for 11 years. And I always had a great sort of younger brother, older brother relationship. I mean, I had utmost respect for him, but he was always just call me Michael, whereas Barry Diller was, don't dare call me Barry. It's Mr. Diller. It's like, okay, I get it. When I got a call from Diller, it was like, oh my God, what did I do? But when I got a call from Michael, it was like, oh, cool. What are we going to talk about? So that was sort of the way they ran their business. Katzenberg, endless energy.
Oh.
Had an infamous call sheet, and his thing was he was going to make, I don't want to exaggerate, but something like 200 calls a day. And he would just call the same people. Like if he wanted to be in business with somebody, he would just call them relentlessly. And sometimes it would just be like, hey, I'm just calling to say hello, see how you're doing, but just nonstop. And I remember one of the first films we tested was Grease. And they didn't want to test it in LA because they didn't want any of the distributors to be able to screen the movie before they put it out for bidding. So we tested it in Hawaii. It was the first time I'd ever been to Hawaii. And I flew over with Jeffrey and
Which city in Hawaii, out of curiosity?
Honolulu.
Okay.
And they didn't want, anyway, the whole thing was fairly ludicrous because, of course, who shows up at the screening? The head of United Artists, the head of Lowe's Theaters. I mean, they all knew about it. It was not a very well kept secret. But Jeffrey used to be an advance man for, I want to say, Mayor Lindsay in New York. So
Mm.
he walked around with of bills. I'm pointing to my chest because they were in his shirt pocket, 5s, 10s, and 20s. And he just had no patience to like stand in line. And we had to get from one hotel to another, and it was maybe 2 blocks away. And there was a long line of people waiting for taxis at the hotel we were at. And he walked right up to the guy calling taxis. He ripped off a 20 and he said, the next one's ours. And it's like, all right. And I just felt cutting in front of all these people, but that was Jeffrey. That sort of epitomized him. And I didn't work with Don and Jerry that much. Don was, if you know about his reputation, it was all completely true. And he was just known to be a real hard charger. And, he had plastic surgery because he acted in Days of Thunder, and I remember meeting with the two of them, and they wanted, it was when I was running development at Paramount. They said, why don't you come work with us? And so
Sorry, there was a little interference there, just to make sure I understood. Don Simpson reached out to you when you were in development and asked if you wanted to come work for him?
yeah. So why don't you come over and run our TV division? And I said, well, I don't know. I mean, I've got a pretty good job right now. And he goes, oh, you're going to make a lot of money. It'll be great. So we chatted for a while. And then Jerry Bruckheimer took me for a walk and he said, so what do you think? And I said, well, he's kind of crazy, isn't he? I mean, if he calls me at 2 a.m. and says, get up to my house at 2 a.m, I'm going to tell him to F. I mean, it's like, I'm not doing that. And he goes, listen, we've been partners for years. I've never been to his house, so don't worry about that. But at the end of the day, I decided it would probably be a bad idea, so I didn't take the job. But yeah, he was tough. Jerry was great. Jerry was always great. But anyway, so it was a great time.
That is great. And for anyone interested, in addition to the novel Gideon Resurrection, another great book to check out is High Concept, the Don Simpson story, just for any of our listeners interested in that. But yeah, so like so development at Paramount, and then you went over to Walt Disney with Eisner when he moved over there. What was your daily life like as a development executive? Because I've heard a lot of things. I spoke with one development executive back in the day when I was working at Paramount, and I asked her what her daily job was, what her biggest responsibilities were, and she said to me like, "Well, right now, we have a movie that just started with Barbara Streisand. So my big goal this week is to find a production start gift for Barbara Streisand." I'm so.
Uh,
Does that describe your job, or is it a little different?
no, thank goodness it doesn't describe my job. As a senior development executive at both Paramount, Disney, um, back then we had fairly robust overall deals. And for those listening who don't know what that means, we would hire writers and producers and pay them a guarantee to be exclusive to the studio for 2 years, let's say. And so let's say the guarantee was $200,000. So they knew that they were going to make that much money in the next 2 years. It was usually more than that, but let's just use that as an example. And then whatever they sold, whatever fees accrued from that would be applied against that guarantee. So if it was a writer and the writer wrote a pilot and he or she would get $50,000 for that, that would be deducted from the 200. So now they've paid off 50,000 at 200,000. So as a development executive, one of the things that we were always doing was looking for people to bring into our stable. Constantly on the phone with agents who you are pitching to and they are pitching to you in terms of talent, and then meeting with that talent and working up us and then bringing them into the networks to sell. So the job was creative and sales. And we weren't limited, of course, to the people who were just on our in our staff. I mean, in our state, we work with anybody who wasn't aligned with another studio. So the day is filled with taking pitches. So we're taking pitches from writers such as yourself. Say, I've got this great idea, and your agent will call and say, "Would you meet with Richard?" And you'd come in and we'd chat. And if it's something that we liked, we would contact your agent and say, "Let's make some sort of a deal, and I think we can sell this at ABC or sell this at NBC." So that's the life of a TV development executive, not buying presents for Barbra Streisand.
So what's in your time, and you were involved in some really amazing shows in development. You did Golden Girls, you did Shogun, you did Winds of War. But I'm curious, what was the worst pitch that you ever got?
Worst pitch. There was a man who we had under contract at Paramount, and he was an older gentleman. He was friend of the president of TV at the time. And so his contemporaries were all a little bit on the older side as well. And they had kind of stale ideas. And I'm not throwing stones at older people because I'm an older person now myself. So I know fresh ideas can still bubble up. But, it was, I don't remember what it was called, but anyway, it was a jazz band that went around the country on a bus and then got to situations. And I was like, I don't understand what this is. He said, no, no, it's great. It's great. And just like, so he went into this, it was, he was pitching the idea and he was describing the saxophone player. And it was also period, which people were buying period back when we were pitching.
Yeah.
As a result of his relationship with my boss, we had to take it in. And I called up my counterpart at ABC and I said, okay, listen, I'm bringing in a pitch. Do me a solid, the meeting. You don't even have to sit through the whole thing. Just take, I have to pitch this. He goes, oh,
Just take the
all
meeting.
right, all right.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So we went in and pitched this, this terrible idea. And we pitched it to a guy named Stu Bloomberg, who used to be vice president of drama development at ABC. He was very smart, very nice guy. But Stu had a tell, which was when he hated an idea, he crossed his legs. He sat on his legs. He like propped himself up in his chair and crossed his legs and sat back down. And that was his tell. And you knew that he hated it. He did it about 3 minutes into the pitch. And this poor guy just kept talking. And I'm going like, just cut it off, man. I mean, it's like, anyway, after about 15 minutes, Stu finally said, sounds really interesting, but I don't think we can fit it in. So, and as we're walking out of the office, he goes, Grant, could you stay back for a second? I said, oh God. He said, yeah, don't ask me for any more favors. I said, I've had it. Anyway, so it was bad enough if I still remember it to this day, because it was a heck of a long time ago.
Yeah. And then you, of course, moved into the realm of independent producing, launching your own projects. How did that, like, what was the story about how that decision came about? Because you must have been at Paramount and Disney a total of like 8, 10 plus years.
Altogether, 11 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, I was pretty senior. Disney was it was so grinding.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there used to be this joke around, like, if you don't come in on Saturday, don't even bother coming in on Sunday. And that was, oh, that's so funny. But it was long hours. And we started at 7 a.m. on Mondays. That's when everybody would come in after doing their weekend reads. Most of the feature people, they have 12 scripts that they took. And I would sit in case they read a script that they thought might be good for TV. That's just a sort of example of, the crazy hour. Also just sort of the attitude of, even though Disney was established, all of us coming in from Paramount, it was more like a startup. So, anyway, I was just sort of done with that.
Mm-hmm. And by startup, you mean like people wearing multiple hats, working all hours of the day. Some people camped out in their offices.
Not an Elon Musk startup. It wasn't, no one was sleeping in their office, but it was the first thing that Michael Eisner and Kipper did was they fired about 400 people because there were a lot of old holdovers who just didn't fit the new mold of the engine that Michael and Jeffrey had. So it was rethink completely. When I came in to run TV, I had to just hire people. There was no one there. And they got rid of most of the overall deals. So then we were out trying to get overall deals. So that's what I mean by a startup. We were just starting to reestablish what Disney was in the mold of what we wanted it to be. Anyway, to answer your question, after the 3 years of that and 8 years of Paramount, it was just like, you know what? I think my calling is real. I just want to try the other side of the desk. I think I've got the skill set to produce based upon the skill set I developed as an executive. And fortunately, that skill set translated. And I think I can write because I've read 1,000 scripts, given 1,000 script notes, and I think I can do it. So I was fortunate enough that I had relationships with agents and with people at other studios who reached out and gave me some opportunities. And the first opportunity I had moving out was I went back to Paramount on a deal for just a year. But while I was there, I wrote Star Trek and was able to write some MacGyver. And that really started solidifying a new path for me, if you will.
Mhm. I gotta say, it's a very interesting journey starting out as lawyer, then news, and then page and research and now development and now writing. Like that's how have you been able to kind of grasp the versatility of it all of your careers? Because that's something that I absolutely value in myself and people I work with. What are the keys to that kind of versatility?
Um, well, one of the things as I said, that I was really pleased to find out was that the skill sets that I had as an executive translated to being a showrunner.
Mhm,
Um, and, so much of running a show, putting aside writing for just a second, but
mhm.
being a showrunner onto, which a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm a showrunner." It's like, No, you're not. You're a writer and you have a producer title." But running a show is a whole situation unto itself because you really have an entire crew working for you. So much of it is making decisions.
Mhm.
When I was starting out in the research department and I got a promotion when I was at Paramount, my boss at that time said, "Okay, let me explain something to you. It's very simple. Now that you're a director, I guess it was,
Mhm.
it's your bat, your ball, your ass. So get out there. When you write an email, well, this was before emails, when you write a memo and your name is on it, you've got to stand by it." It's like, all right, I'm a big boy. I can do that. The first time I was hired as a showrunner was on this show called Poltergeist
Mhm.
in Vancouver, and was replacing someone who wasn't cutting it. So I came in halfway through
Mhm.
production of season one, and I walked into the concept meeting or into a production meeting. So it's a huge table, and there's 30 people there, and they didn't know who I was.
Mhm.
And I was introduced as, this grand, he's a new executive producer. And people were very like, "Oh, great. Another American that we have to listen to, another pompous dope who doesn't know what he's talking about, but just because he's American, he run the show." And one of the things I learned was, and I have no problem doing it, is asking questions. Cause it's like, I'm good at what I do, but I don't know why you need a 50K light here as opposed to something else you know, so I would ask questions of everybody. But it
Mhm.
became very obvious that one of the problems with the previous showrunner was he was afraid to make decisions.
Mhm.
And the department heads are afraid to make decisions because it's too much weight on their shoulders.
Yeah.
So
Too much weight
they
on
were
their
talking
shoulders,
about
right?
this um set that they're building, and they said, "But we sort of got to a standstill because we don't know what color to paint it." And I said, "Well, what do you mean you don't know what color to paint it? Isn't that just part of like haven't that been decided?" "Well, it was all decided, but now we don't know whether we're going to paint it, like beige or we're going to, green." And I said, "Well, I mean, is there effects? I mean, visual effects in there that you have green?" They said, "No." I said, "Well, does it have something to do with the costuming clashing?" "No." I said, "Well, then just paint it green." And they go, "Oh, thank God." They wanted someone to make a decision.
Uh-huh.
And I learned so I learned there, but I learned a long time ago. It's like, you make as a showrunner, you probably make, I don't know, 30, 40 decisions a day, small,
Mhm.
small ones, but creative ones, especially when you're on set and you're changing dialogue or you're changing performances and things like that. And guess what? Not all of them are going to be right,
Mhm.
but you have to rely upon your sense. You have to rely upon your experience. And you got to know that once in a while you're going to make a call, but the train on the tracks, and that train's moving down the tracks because because you got to get to the next station by the end of the day. So, um, in terms of writing,
Mhm.
I always thought that I had a knack for it, and it's a learned skill. I mean, the first I wrote that I was actually paid for was a MacGyver, and I suspect it probably wasn't great, but they gave me notes, and I was very diligent about rewriting it, getting it in on time, and they did polish on it, and they hired me again. And the funniest one was I was hired to write a Star Trek Next Generation,
Mhm.
and I went in and pitched a bunch of ideas, And I think Brandon Braga at the time was running the show, and he said, "Look, just there's no story you're going to come up with that we haven't already either done or haven't already it hasn't already have we haven't seen. So we're going to give you a story that was a busted script, and we want you to write it based on the story." I said, "Great." I wrote the script.
The first show that you are credited as creating is Time Tracks.
Correct.
How did that come about?
Um, I was working at a production company at Warner Brothers,
Mhm.
and they were looking to develop shows for something called for first run syndication.
Mhm.
And I had been working with a guy named Gary Nardino, who was my boss at Paramount at one point. He was president of Paramount TV,
Mhm.
and he now had a deal at Warner Brothers. And I came up with the idea of Time Tracks. We married it with a producer named Jeff Hayes, who been producing a lot of things in Australia,
Mhm.
where we could get a great production crew for, I want to say the Australian dollar was under 60 cents.
Mhm.
And so we were presenting it, and they said, "Well, great idea, but you really need someone who's an established showrunner."
Mhm.
So we had a relationship with Harv Bennett from when we worked at Paramount.
Mhm.
And Harv was coming off of doing, besides a lot of work in TV from his Universal days, he was also had done, I think, 2 or 3 of the Star Trek movies. So he had a lot of cachet. So we brought Harv in. So Harv and I shared co-created by credit on it, and we ended up selling it, and we got an order straight to 22, and shot it at the Warner Studios in the Gold Coast in Brisbane, Australia.
Yeah, and this was around the time when there were a lot of productions in Australia and New Zealand shooting. Not only do you have Time Tracks, but you had other stages being set up down there. You had Hercules, you had Xena, you had a whole bunch of stuff that was kind of using that area for production.
Right, yeah, those were in, New Zealand, I think,
Mhm.
but really interesting way that they worked in Australia. They didn't have Teamsters, so,
Mhm.
like, the electric department, they would load up their truck, and they would drive their truck to location, and they would unload their truck and go to work. So there's no one sitting in the truck getting a salary for sitting in the truck. So that was a good thing. They had this British uh, holdover that did have like you break for lunch, as you probably know.
Mhm.
If you shoot for 12 hours, 6 hours in, regardless of what time you start, 6 hours in is quote lunch. Lunch
Mhm.
could be at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, or it could be at noon,
Mhm.
or any time in between. But then I think 3 hours later, they took 3 hours in, and then 3 hours after lunch, took like a 20-minute tea break. it's, it's just like, okay, like just stop working. And they were having their tea. It's like, whatever works for you guys.
Yeah, they have the same thing in India, funny enough.
Is that really? Well,
Yeah.
it's very humane, uh,
Mhm.
but it's another half hour of shooting or another hour of shooting, but it comes with the territory.
Now, for those who don't know
But
Time Tracks, oh, sorry.
no, sorry. I was just going to say, so we had some success in the first season, and we got picked up for a second season as well. So we ended up doing 44 episodes, which was really fabulous. So sorry, Richard, I interrupted you.
No, no, you're good. I was just gonna kind of summarize. So Time Tracks is about a detective from the future, I think 100 or 150 years in the future, who goes back and tracks down a bunch of prison escapees who have escaped to the past, our current day, and is sending them back to the future to serve their time. And I like a huge sci-fi nut. I loved the series. The thing that always got me with that and with other syndicated shows of the time, like Babylon 5 and other stuff, was it was always hard to pin down when exactly they were airing when where I was. So it was
Uh,
weird to yeah, so that was I think that was the big drawback of syndication. But now with
mm.
everything going digital with streaming, like all of that has been resolved. You can just go and pretty much watch anything at almost any time.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Much to the dismay of SAG right now.
Yes, yes. Though on that note, at this time, the WGA, at the time of recording, WGA strike has been settled. SAG strike is still ongoing. But there has been a lot of discussion that streamers are pulling a lot of the less popular stuff off of their platforms because they're worried about what the resulting deals will be and how the royalties and will increase after that. So that's an interesting thing that's going on. Um, but let me ask, so you discussed one issue, which was you needed to attach a showrunner who had some cachet in order to get the project sold and made. How what are the other ways and what are the other tricks? As someone who's been on both sides of the desk, what are the other tricks that you use or have used to sell shows?
Well, I learned again many years ago something that I refer to as a 100-point scale. It's fictitious. There are no points, but a 100-point scale
Mhm,
will become very obvious. Let's say, first of all, understand that when you go pitch something,
mhm,
unless you are in a very high position as a writer, producer, or a director,
mhm,
or a star, you're going to be pitching to someone who doesn't have the ability to say yes. You're pitching to a gatekeeper.
yeah, most
They
creative
have the
executives
ability,
are gatekeepers, yeah.
yes, they have the ability to sell and say no 90 to 95% of the time.
Mhm,
Uh, and if they say yes, it's yes, I really like this. Let me go pitch it to the person in the next office who has the ability to say yes.
mhm,
So as a result, one of the things when you're going into pitch to somebody like that,
mhm,
I'm a firm believer in leave behinds. There's mixed feelings about whether you leave something behind. So if you're a young writer or uh, any kind of a writer or producer, and you're going in and pitching at one of the networks or one of the streamers, you're pitching this really cool idea. Generally, there'll be a very low level and they're taking notes, or maybe even the person you're pitching to is taking notes.
mhm,
I'll always in 1 or 2 pages summarize what my pitch is, not
mhm,
too much, and say, "And I've written it down for you so you don't have to take note." First of all, they love that.
mhm.
Second of all, you get their full attention instead of them doodling down their shopping list while you're talking. And but more importantly, if it's something that they like and they're going to present to the next level, you have given them the information that you want presented to them as opposed to them screwing it up and not taking notes correctly. So
Mhm,
leave behinds, I think, are important.
mhm,
So back to this fictitious 100-point scale.
mhm.
And the fact that you're going in to a situation where the odds are stacked against you, you need to do whatever you can to cobble together a presentation package that makes it difficult for them to say no.
A presentation package that makes it difficult for them to say no. Sorry, I'm
If you need 100 points to get a yes, uh, you have to sort of self evaluate how much you are worth to the project,
Mhm,
and then how strong your concept is. So, for example, if I'm going in to pitch to a streamer
mhm,
and I say, okay, at this point in my career, because of my 30 years as a showrunner and 100 hours of writing television,
mhm.
uh, I'm worth 40 points. So I need a 60-point idea. So is this a concept that's so fresh and so new, and it's something that I know they need that just the combination of me and this idea is going to get a deal? Well, probably not.
Mhm,
So what do I need to do? I need to go out and get a director that they want to work with, or find out if they have any actors that they have under contract that they're looking for material. And now I'm starting to cobble together more point values, if you will. Uh, Um, and hopefully I put together enough between me and the idea and a young hot actor that they say, "Oh, you know what? This is all coming together. This is something that we can take to the next level."
mhm,
Or for someone who is younger in the business, doesn't have the cachet, and they have a great idea, they need to, well, they should, if they can, align themselves with someone who the networks want to work with, or at least align themselves with someone who can sort of ensure their work. There are several instances in my career where I was hired on to the second season of a show
Mhm.
because the first season of a show was done by a showrunner who didn't have the experience and the show was going off the rails.
Mm.
And so then they would reach out to me and say, we need to get this thing back on track. And that happens as well. So if you're younger and you have the experience and you can align yourself with someone who does, it gives the buyer a little more comfort.
Mhm.
The other thing that's important in the marketplace right now is IP, which, as you know, but for your listeners, that's intellectual property.
Mhm.
Intellectual property is a book. It's a magazine article, and magazines for you who are young are things that people used to read that are on paper, like comic books. They're like comic books, but have, anyway, you know what a magazine is. But or it's a format, a foreign format that you buy or option. If you have a book, if you're going in and pitching and you have a book, even if it's not a bestseller, and you can actually put something tangible down on someone's desk, it has much more weight than just going in with an idea. So
Interesting.
intellectual property, now you can either buy intellectual property, you can option it, or you can create it. Now, when you create an idea and you register it with a Writers Guild, for example,
Mhm.
uh, that's intellectual property unto itself, but it doesn't have the same cachet as a published novel, for example.
Mhm. You pointed out something very interesting, which is the idea of putting something physical on somebody's desk, and this is tangentially related, but it does help in what I've seen and heard from colleagues, uh, to put something on the desk that focuses the attention, even if it's not a physical book, but might be something as simple as a prop. One story I remember was, a producer was going into HBO, and he was not a writer, but HBO at the time was a very writer-centric, network, and they were looking to back strong writers. But he went in with a pitch specifically about the 2000 election and recount, and he didn't have a writer to go in on the pitch with, but he had one of the infamous ballots with the pregnant Chad, and so he put it there on the desk as a prop, and it was, uh, incredibly helpful in illustrating the story, and it wound up, getting the project sold. So I
Wow.
think yeah, so I think you've hit on something really key, which is having something tangible to put on the table. Um, and I noticed also that Time Tracks, and also Gideon Resurrection and some of the other titles you've worked on have all been crime thrillers. What attracts you to that genre?
Well, I wanted to get away from
Mhm.
uh, paranormal and things like that. I mean, I really liked doing Outer Limits. I mean, Poltergeist. And then I went right from there into Outer Limits, which I loved because it was an anthology. And I
Mhm.
ended up working on Masters of Science Fiction and Masters of Horror, which were also anthologies,
Mhm.
which, as you know, a different storytelling mode. And every week you're making a little movie with all new cast.
Mhm.
I guess it's because the kind of authors that I read, well, I was fortunate enough to work with a couple of great authors. I'm friends with Dean Koontz
Oh, wow.
because I produced one of his books as a movie, Piece of Fear,
Mhm.
and we became friends off of that. And I've been to his home a couple of times, and he to mine. So I read everything. He sends me his books before they come out. So whether I like it or not, I read all of his books.
Mhm.
Although I do like. Tom Perry is a friend of mine. I worked with Tom when he was a screenwriter. Bob Crace, who was also a great screenwriter, and he's been a terrific novelist for so long. Um, and there's a writer named John Sanford who I've read all of his. I think there's maybe 50 of them. And I read Grisham, um, Don Winslow. I read all of his books. He has written a trilogy on the Mexican drug wars, which are brilliant that they're making into a big movie. But so those are the kinds of things that I lean towards. I just lean towards, you know, crime fiction, if you will. I just enjoy writing in that area a lot more. And I just find it, you can do a lot more with character. And for me anyway, I like the sort of puzzle aspect of it as well.
And let me ask on, because you have worked on some heavy hitting stuff: Poltergeist, Outer Limits, Lois Clark, Masters of Horror, Masters of Science Fiction, Eureka. Eureka, by the way, which I'm also a fan of, and I kept seeing reference at Comic-Con when I used to go every year. So very strong basis there. Out of all of those works, what do you think are some of the biggest lessons that you learned producing and writing those?
The most important thing, uh, technically, as a showrunner, is to communicate,
Mhm.
and to the material. Just so your listeners understand,
Mhm.
it takes a couple of months to take a script from idea to shooting draft. And the reason it takes long is not because it takes so long to write it, is because there's so many approvals at every step, from the production company and then the studio and then the broadcaster. Everybody's got notes. And
Mhm.
so the process of writing a script is quite laborious in terms of the time it takes. So you have to stay way on top of that, because if it takes you a couple months to write a script, it only takes you 7 days to shoot it.
Mhm.
So every 7 days, you need another script. So
Mhm.
you're constantly feeding this beast, and you have to stay ahead of it. That's one key lesson. The other thing that's always worked for me, different showrunners have different MOs.
Mhm.
My MO was communicate everything to everybody. Just
Mhm.
tell everybody. I mean, except obviously, some stuff you don't tell people, but um,
Yeah, it would be weird if a showrunner got up and said, "Hey, I've got a rash this morning. No."
yeah. There are some showrunners who believe that knowledge is power,
Mhm.
hold on to it tightly, and they don't communicate that to the people that are working for them. And in doing so, they hogtie.
Mhm.
On every show that I do, if I have an idea of what is coming out of the pipeline 7 scripts ahead,
Mhm.
I'll sit down with locations, I'll sit down with the production designer, I'll sit down with casting, and I'll say, in 2 months, we're going to need a giant arena. So start working on it now. In
Mhm.
2 months, we're going to need a piece of stunt casting. Go look at actors right now between 35 and 45, someone with a name value.
Mhm.
If you wait till the last minute, you're not going to have as many options, and they cost more, obviously.
Mhm.
If you've got a special prop that you're going to have to build, on Outer Limits, we did an episode with Joseph Levitt, and it was an episode that I wrote, and we needed a sort of a new age, an outer space gun. Judd Nelson was in it from the Breakfast Club as well, and we needed this cool prop. And I said, let's design it now, even though we're not going to shoot this for a month. And it still cost like $8,000 or something like that to build. It was really cool. And it was actually one of the things I took home with me. But had we waited until the last minute, we would have ended up with something that looked crappy. So those are some of the lessons that I've learned. The other thing is to treat, and this is going to sound trite, but it's
Mhm.
so true. Treat everybody with respect and learn everybody's name. I mean,
Mhm.
just the PAs, the key grips, just treat everybody with respect. So I'll tell you one little story. I was working on this show, Jeremiah,
Mhm.
and Sean Astin came on the season that I was doing. I did season 2 as a showrunner.
Mhm.
And Sean, yeah, is full of energy,
Mhm.
and he's not a very he's not a team player.
Mhm.
He likes it he likes it to be about him, and he comes across very nice, but he's just not a great team player. And as a result, he was starting to rub people the wrong way a little bit.
Mm.
But as a result of him coming off of Lord of the Rings, he had some cachet and some heat, and he ended up getting a part of his deal was to direct an episode. He hadn't directed before. He made one episode of something, but he wasn't a director but that's okay.
Mhm.
So he's directing this episode, and he's got this scene where there are 8 people around a dining room table, which, as you know, as a director, is death.
Yeah,
Cover 8
because
people sitting around a dining room table. You have to shoot so many angles to cut. And in TV is just not, you just have to kind of do a master and some kind of 2 shots and things like that. Anyway, so shooting it, so we light it from one direction. We're shooting the east half of the table, if you will. And then we're going to do a relight, and we're going to shoot the west side of the table. Well, it's going to be about a 40 or 45 minute relight because we have to turn everything around.
Yeah.
And Sean starts complaining, we got to do it faster. We got to do it faster. I'm running out of time. We're running out of time. It's like, we can't do it any faster. And getting back to my point of treating everybody nice, he slumped down in his director's chair and pulled his hat down, and he said loud enough for everybody to hear, "You know, they always told me not to work with animals and kids, but they didn't say anything about Canadian crews."
Oh my God. I,
Well, the key grip came over to me and he said, "Hey, boss." I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Did you hear that?" I said, "Ah, yes." He said, "From now on the rest of this episode, the boys are working at the speed of scale." I
at
said,
what scale?
"Don't do that." The speed of scale. In other words, we're not busting our humps for this guy. I said, "You know what? You're not busting your humps for him. You're busting your humps for me. You're busting your humps for the show.
Uh-huh.
Don't have your guys drag their feet." And so I went over, talked to Sean, and I said, do you realize what you just did? You just cut your throat, man. I mean, so you just alienated everybody who's working on this show." He's like, "What? Oh, I didn't mean it." Anyway, a shining example of just treat people just treat people nice. Just treat people with respect. Respect everybody because it's such a team effort. So anyway.
Yeah. Don't, oh my God. I have no words because I can't even believe someone would be that stupid to say that. I'm just shocked. I'm like, wow. Anyway, what are you working on besides Gideon Resurrection? What else are you working on now?
Well, I'm just finishing up. Well, I'm not finishing up. I'm just about 100 pages into the 3rd book in the trilogy.
Uh-huh.
Um, I have there was a science fiction pilot I wrote about 6 years ago that got on spec, that got optioned a couple of times, but never went forward. Just, that's life.
Mhm.
And I've been writing that as a novel as well. And I'd say I was about 200 pages into it. So when I'm done with Gideon, I'm going to go back to that.
Mhm.
And the other thing is, I cook pretty seriously, and I have written. I started cooking when I went on the road because I was on location for about 20 years, mostly in Canada,
Mhm.
in Vancouver and Toronto, and one cold winter in Edmonton, which was hellacious.
A lot of
Um,
poutine. Um,
and so because I was there by myself, I started cooking, and I would have people over. Long story short, I cobbled together a bunch of recipes in a quote cookbook. I'm saying with air quotes. Um, but over the years, my cooking has gotten better, and I've revamped this cookbook about 10 times. It's on my website
mhm.
and for free.
Oh,
And it's called 44 Degrees because that's where I live. I live in Bend, Oregon now, so we're at 4 degrees latitude. Um,
nice.
but I wanted to say also for your listeners,
Uh-huh.
if they go to my website and they can not only download the book and read about the Gideon stuff, but if they can send me a note via the contact page. And if they say that they heard this interview, then I will send them a free Kindle version of Gideon Resurrection.
Nice. So everybody listening, check out the contact page and drop a note.
Yeah, it's Grant E.
Oh.
Rosenberg.
GrantERosenberg.com. Yeah. If you could go back to a younger version of yourself back at UC Davis and give yourself some advice, what would that advice be?
Well, what a thoughtful question that is. I guess it falls into the area of perspective.
Mhm.
And that is when I've always been a very A personality and a hard charger, and I've got, I need to keep busy, want to keep busy. And getting into the entertainment field is a field that you have to be very aggressive in, not nasty, but aggressive.
Uh-huh.
As an aside, I do a lot of lectures to upcoming writers and at colleges and stuff.
Mhm.
And I say, if you want to make it in this business, there's a fine line between being aggressive and being a pain in the ass. And you have to up against that line all the time,
Mhm.
or you're going to be left behind. So I guess what I would have mentioned to myself about was keeping perspective in terms of what's important in life. I didn't spend enough time. I've got 3 fabulous daughters and I still have a great relationship with them, but I wished I was around more for them than I was, because I threw myself into work, and my work took me out of the country for 10 months at a time, because perspective comes with maturity. You don't have perspective when you're young, because it's just like you're bulletproof and you can do everything. So I'm not going to worry about it. But so I would have given myself that advice and I probably wouldn't have taken it.
Perspective comes with maturity. I like that. I like that a lot. And that is Season 3, Episode 2 of the Producers Lounge podcast. Thank you to my guest, Grant E. Rosenberg, for joining us. You can find out more about him by checking out the show notes, including the contact page on his website. Check out the show notes for a free ebook from Grant, and don't forget to mention you heard him on the Producers Lounge podcast. Our intro and outro music today was Backed Vibes by Kevin MacLeod. We'd love to hear from you, and you can check out this week's accompanying article on greaterandgrander.com entitled The Importance of Recognizing Opportunity and Taking Action. Link in the show notes. You can stay up to date by following us on YouTube and social media at the handle Greater Grander, all one word. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and wherever fine podcasts are found. And also, if you like what we do, share this podcast with a friend who you think will enjoy it. Join us next week for more cocktails and questions, and until then, keep producing dreams.